Thank you very much for inviting me, and a very happy Nowruz to everybody here and to the whole community all over this country, all over Europe, all over the Middle East and all over Kurdistan. Happy Nowruz to everybody. I've met many old friends on the way in here, and we've been together at many festivals over many years, and somebody just reminded me of the memorable concerts that we have held with Siobhan and others in support of the miners during the miners' strike in 1983, 84, and all the other community events and concerts that we've been involved with or held ever since. And I want to say a big thank you to the participants and the activists and the leaders of all aspects of the community, the Kurdish community in this country, not just for the work they do within the community, but the huge contribution they make to the wider cultural life of London and all of our cities. The Kurdish community is very much part of the mosaic of modern Britain. Thank you for everything that you do. Ibrahim made a very profound speech there about the history that the Kurdish people have been through. The history of Western partition at the time of the First World War, when the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement was made, and the way in which the hopes of Kurdish people were dashed at the end of the First World War, and the Kurdish people driven into the mountains in all of the countries of the region, in Iran, Iraq, in Syria, and of course in Turkey. And ever since then there's been this struggle for identity, this struggle for language, this struggle for rights. And I think it's just unbelievable that here we are now, well into the 21st century, and much of that struggle still goes on, that struggle for identity and rights. The killing of Kurdish people by armed forces in Turkey, by armed forces in other countries, and in particular by ISIL Daesh in Syria at the present time. At the end, every war ends with a political settlement of some sort. The First World War ended with the victor's justice of Versailles. That victor's justice of Versailles was indeed very beneficial to the powers that had succeeded in winning the First World War. It was devastating for many of the peoples of the region, and indeed the lines on the map, as Ibrahim pointed out, are the cause of so many further problems today. The political settlement that must come, and there will be one, must recognise the inalienable rights of the Kurdish people to their community, their identity, their culture and their language, and that has to be reflected in the political settlement that affects the whole area. I want to see peace, I want to see justice for the Kurdish people. But I want to recognise that unless that recognition comes about from cultural identity in all parts of Europe, as well as what's happening within the region, it simply will not last. I've been at trials in Turkey where I've seen Kurdish people on trial basically for promoting the Kurdish language and little else. We've seen the way in which Kurdish people have been treated in so many places. So when we celebrate Nowruz, we celebrate in some ways with a slightly heavy heart, because we know the suffering of so many other people. But the strength of the community here, the strength of the community in Germany and other parts of Europe is a very, very important part of the whole struggle for identity of the Kurdish people. Some people say to me, well, cultural identity politics isn't very important, we should all be one. Yes, we should all be one. One human race, we should all be one humanity, we should all treat people with humanity, but above all, our strength comes from our diversity, our strength comes from our respect for other faiths, other ideas, and other cultures. But I conclude with this message, quite simply this. There are many colleagues here, MPs from North London and other places. I can see Meg here, I can see Kate Osamor, and I'm sure there are many other colleagues who haven't yet come across this evening, who've worked very hard on the Kurdish issue and justice for all communities for a very long time. We are faced with a refugee crisis in the world, the like of which this planet has never seen. There are more displaced people now on the whole of planet Earth than have been at any time in recorded history. There are many displaced people desperately trying to seek a place of safety in Greece and travel on to other parts of Europe. There has to be a support, there has to be a recognition of those people's needs. But above all, it has to be a humanitarian one. They cannot be held prisoner in Turkey or in Greece or anywhere else. They must be granted some place of long-term safety, possibly later to return home, possibly to settle in a new society. But if we, as a community, don't reach out the hand of humanity and friendship to all those people that are suffering this humanitarian disaster at the moment, it will be a shame on us. It will be a shame on this generation that are in control of matters all over Europe at the present time. And we should all recognise we could all be refugees somewhere at some time. Many of you in this room have come to this country as refugees, and indeed I've worked with many of you when you first arrived all those years ago. And the contribution you've made shows that we should recognise that those that seek asylum, those that seek refuge, make an absolutely massive contribution to the society they've come to, because they want to make that contribution. They want their society and that society to succeed. So I say thank you to all of you for that. There's one other thing I would like to mention tonight. That is, one other point I'd like to mention tonight. There have been many people who've been giving huge support to the cause of human rights and justice over many years, and indeed over their own lifetime. I understand something else is going to be said later on tonight. He was a great friend of mine, he was a great man, was Eric Avery in the House of Lords. He gave his life to human rights and to justice for all people. There was no greater advocate for dispossessed people, people denied a homeland, people who were struggling for their own identity, their own independence and their right to live. Eric Avery sadly died a very short time ago. He was a great man. We mourn him and we thank him, as indeed we mourn all those that have done so much before us to try and bring about freedom, justice and recognition for the Kurdish people, as we do for all people. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for inviting me here tonight.